Welcome back to the Global Longevity Association podcast. My name is Ella Davar. I'm your host, and today I am honored to welcome Dr. Todd Cooperman from ConsumerLab. Dr. Cooperman's work has been a tremendous contribution to health and wellness and longevity industry. He founded Consumer Labs in 1999. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. Yeah. It's
And
been a
he's
long time.
He's been a watchdog in this unregulated wild industry, which is like so hard to imagine that it is unregulated. The supplement line, specifically industry, is something that anyone can come up with any day and claim anything. But your work and your specific background, like what you've done, and I would love to hear the history of how did you come up with this idea? Because I know you have a medical background. How did you start Consumer Labs, and what's the mission behind it?
Sure. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on, Elle. I appreciate it. So I'm an MD by schooling.
Mhm.
Got my degree at Boston University School of Medicine in '87, and then actually went into the pharmaceutical industry for several years, biotech, and became a little bit disillusioned with the process, the uncertainty of developing, new drugs. Very difficult. And also became more aware of all the basic consumer information that people weren't getting in a lot of different ways. At that time, actually, the biggest demand was for information about health plans. The HMOs and all these types of health plans were just starting at that time. And so I started a company that evaluated consumers' perception satisfaction with health plans, and drug formularies, things like that. That was called Care Data. That was actually acquired after 4 years. But in the meantime, I saw another opportunity for information for consumers being the whole supplement area, which exploded after 1994 with the passage of the law Deshay, is the contraction for the name for it. But that law allowed supplement manufacturers to make claims on the products in terms of what they might do for you. They couldn't claim that it prevents or treats or cures any kind of disease, but they could claim that it helps maintain this or that. And you'll see those claims all over. And that really led to an explosion in the area, especially at that point, herbal supplements. There were some journalists actually that were doing a little bit of testing to see, well, are these products do they even contain what they claim, let alone do what they say? Um, and they were finding all kinds of problems, and no one was really doing this type of testing in a systematic way. And so I started ConsumerLab in 1999, pulled a researcher at the FDA who was the FDA's role in all this is really more of a firefighting role. When there are big problems,
Big
they'll get
problems.
involved. Um, the FTC gets involved in terms of claims that are being made that go beyond what can be stated. So I grabbed him to head our research because I'm not an analytical, chemist. I'm an MD. And so we began buying and reporting, testing and reporting on the quality of all kinds of supplements on the market. At this point, we are the leading group doing that. We've been doing it for 25, 26 years. We've tested well over, I don't know, 8,000 products.
Wow.
Um, and we report all that on consumerlab.com for our members because that's what pays for the testing. So I think
Membership.
it's now like $63 a year, and you get all of our results. Plus, we put out new reports all the time, on different categories, and we've extended that into a lot of different health foods now. Healthy foods like psyllium or dark chocolate, So not just the supplements, which
Our
go way
food.
beyond the herbals, yeah, but multivitamins. So now we cover probably, over 90% of what's popular in terms of types of supplements. We don't cover every product out there because that would be impossible.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the history, of ConsumerLab.
All right. So before I get into specifics about food testing and supplement testing, which everyone wants to know, all most of my listeners are practitioners and health coaches and nutritionists, and our job is to give practical advice to consumers. And I wanted to get the definition straight. So Consumer Labs is independent supplement and food testing expert lab run by you and your team out of where? Where are you guys located?
Yeah, I'm based in New York. That's where the company's technically based. Our research office is in New Jersey,
Mhm.
because that's where our head of research is. Um, and then we have people also, other kinds of people who work from home from different places around the
Okay.
country. But it's a team of about a dozen full-time people.
Good.
Um, yeah, and we use laboratories that are all over the country, because the kind of tests that we do go way beyond anything that we could do in-house often. Um, and we need to repeat tests.
Mm.
If we find that there's a problem with the product before we publish that, we
Wow.
always send it to a second laboratory to make sure we're correct, which is why after 25, 6 years, we've never been sued because we were very, very certain about the information that we're putting out. And that's critical because it's really, if you just send something out to a lab, you don't really know which test to choose, or the lab might make a mistake.
Mm.
You could get the wrong information.
That's
So
very good to know. Wow, you're really thorough with your job. It's not a one-time hit and then just like run with it and all the headlines, right? So really, most of the practitioners right now are using this term to convey quality, which is third-party tested. Could you please help me
mhm.
define that for our listeners?
Sure. So we are a third party. We're independent. We make no money selling supplements. Companies can pay us to have a product tested. It's tested like all the other products that we purchase. And most of the products we purchase are just based on what our members are using. We survey them. Let's say we're about to do a CoQ10 review. We survey our 100,000 paying members. We ask them what they're using, and that's kind of what determines what we buy. But any company can always come to us and say, well, we want you to test our product as well. Again, we have to go out and buy it off the shelf. They can't send it to us. Um, Whatever the results are, those are the results. They don't have an opportunity, to interfere with that. And if it passes, they can use our seal, which is a third-party certification seal. It's registered, with the Patent and Trademark Office. It is actually the oldest program doing that in the country at this point. There are others that do third-party testing, like USP in particular. I'm sure you're familiar with USP. USP is like, I don't know how old that organization is, well over 100 years old. They weren't always doing testing until actually more recently. We were testing before they were in terms of a certification program, but they have a certification seal. We have a certification seal. The NSF is another one that has a certification seal. These are all third-party groups. I think what distinguishes us is that those other groups actually work with the industry more closely. They will actually obtain products from the companies directly. We don't. We have to buy it off the shelf because we want to know what the consumer experience is.
Exactly.
If like we have tested, for example, some probiotics over the years where,
Mm-hmm.
all the organisms were dead, basically, not viable. Company never, companies didn't even realize that this had happened, but it had to do with the shipping and storage of those products, which is not an issue you would find if you were getting the product, directly shipped from the manufacturer. So
Right.
that's why it's critical that we do it that way. And then companies can challenge us. They're welcome to do that. We send them for free, the results of our tests. We just require that if they really want to challenge it, we'll send it to another lab that we both agree on. They have to publish those results on their website, and that basically at that point, these companies go away. They stop kind of, rattling their sabers and threatening lawsuits,
I
because
mean,
most likely it's just going to show what we found.
Todd, I have to say, like, before my next question, the work that you do is so incredibly important in our industry because, the rising movement of health and wellness, everyone is an expert these days, but everyone's confused at the end of the day. They're all learning or reading off of these labels, and marketing claims are loud these days. So, what you do is incredible. So, now on this topic, you got into the supplementation topic, and it's a big one. Could you tell me more after testing so many products. I really want to see like the trend, like where is it leaning towards, like the generic advice that you could give to people. What I'm seeing, there used to be like if it's a larger brand, something that's like established its credibility, it's a better one than something like that's just like was developed yesterday and they have these like big marketing budget, right? Like don't trust these guys, they're not proven yet. Now I see a little bit in the industry that it's actually the opposite. The conservatives are not catching up with the science. It's the young companies, they're cutting edge. We should be listening to them. And consumers are like, should I really trust the new companies? Like, do you see that trend that's like it's the older, established, larger corporations that have a safer product versus the new ones that are like a fresher formulations or new claims and the new cutting edge science? Where is the trend right now in terms of like supplements and the trust of the quality?
Mm. Um, from what we see, I'm just like fact-based. More of the older established companies, do tend to have better quality.
Mm,
Younger companies are kind of learning the ropes still.
yeah.
They may not be aware of some issues that come up. They may not be aware of interactions. Like when we first started testing gummies, which
Mm-hmm.
are all over now, all over the
Mm-hmm.
place, we found so many problems with the gummies because the companies making them had no idea really how to make them. They were really literally spraying on, ingredients onto a candy. That's how they were originally made. And it was very hard to control how much you're getting in there. They then found that certain ingredients didn't play well together in a semi-liquid environment like a gummy. They start interacting, they start breaking down. Um, so that's why companies that kind of come in with something new, there's often a lot of growing pain, that comes with that, and we see that often. Um, I should also say, that there are a lot of companies out there that are really fly by night that you're going to see on like Amazon, because like we find that 1 out of 5 products fails our tests because they have too little, too much. They don't break apart properly. They're stale, things like that. Um, but we're just looking at the products that our members, who are pretty sophisticated people, they include nutritionists, but mostly consumers. Um, we're looking at the brands that they're suggesting, and these are generally more established brands. If you were to go on Amazon and just randomly like buy CoQ10 or multivitamin or fish oil, whatever, you're going to find a lot more problems. And some of the companies in the industry actually have been publishing reports where they've gone out and done that, looked at their competitors on like Amazon or Walmart.com, and what they're finding is, half the products may not be up to snuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the biggest issue is really people just like random, buying things on online right now, and who from companies that they probably even, hardly heard of.
All right, now a very interesting question. After testing 7 to 8 thousand different products and seeing the quality of it, do you take supplements? And if you do, which ones and which brands do you trust outside of the lab? What do you recommend to your family, and what do you personally go with?
Right, right. So it's not just the testing that we do here. It's also we're constantly reviewing the clinical literature
Hmm.
because our readers, our members, they want to know first, should they even bother taking, something? Um, and then if so, then we go on and show them, okay, here are the products out there, and here are the best ones, here are the best price, the ones that have the most value, things like that. Um, but having a medical background, having spent 25 years reading the literature every single day on all these different products, the latest clinical research, um, I take very few supplements. I am much more inclined to get my nutrition from foods than I am from a supplement. Um, and I'm sure as a dietitian, you firmly, agree with that as well. The few things that I do take, I take some B12, my levels a little like lower than normal, probably just due to my age. Uh, my people in my family take some melatonin to help them fall asleep because it
Mm,
really does trigger sleep.
yeah.
Um, I don't recommend people take it on an ongoing basis, but as needed. And you can get by with a low dose. 1 milligram might be enough. A lot of people are taking 5, 10, 20 milligrams, and there are problems being found. I take a little vitamin D in the winter, and I mean a little. Like 1,000 IU. Um, there's a lot of evidence. People have overdone it, with vitamin D. People think they have to have these crazy high levels because they get these reports back from the laboratory showing that they're low normal or below normal, but normal is really anything over 20 nanograms per ml. Some people are trying to shoot for levels like 50 or 60, and there's evidence showing there's a downside, when you get too much vitamin D. There are as you know, the established upper intake levels. For
Mhm.
vitamin D, it's 4,000 IU per day. I wouldn't even get close to that myself, unless I were really, really deficient. Um, I have daughters. They've taken iron at times, um, but really not a lot of supplements, in our house.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
One supplement that I really want to focus on is a little bit, from my understanding, is harder to test probiotics. How do you
Mm.
count, like, it's the amount of strains out there, the number of how do they count them, the live bacteria, right? How do
Yeah.
you test that? And if there is a recommendation, because I specialize in gut health testing, and even with that, it's so hard to pinpoint because your microbiome changes every day, depends on the foods that you're eating and the bacteria growth. Like, how do you control that? And the supplements, I've always said, like, even though like I recommend some supplements, when it comes to probiotics, I've always said I'm very impartial, meaning like I don't recommend one specific strain or one specific formula, because they all are important to some extent, and there's so many, right? It's not just like nine or like 12 B vitamins, right? There's so many more. So could you talk a little bit more about probiotics testing, efficacy, especially from the literature that you guys are studying, and its connection, because microbiome studies are on the rise now. Science is like catching up with it, but it's still a lot of gray areas when it comes to recommendations of specific probiotic strains.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a kind of a crazy area of probiotics. I remember, just historically, people, it was, you're going to repopulate your gut, with these probiotics, which doesn't really happen. As you know, these things, they last for a few days in your gut and then they're gone. So it's not like a long-term solution, for anything, a probiotic, in my opinion. Um, there are studies that come out that do show some, limited benefit with probiotics. Like if you are taking an antibiotic, it may reduce the chance of antibiotic-associated diarrhea.
Mhm.
Um, and then you see other little studies showing, other interesting maybe benefits relating to mood and things like that. But I'm not like wholly, really tremendously convinced by any of those that have come out. In terms of the quality, so we test these products, and basically, what the studies have shown is you need at least 1 billion CFUs, colony forming units. We're now seeing some other terms being used by some companies that are not using CFUs, but I forget what they call them, maybe FSUs, or I forget what they're called. But CFUs are really the way to go, because basically what they're doing is you're plating out the um, the the uh, the product on on some type of auger or whatever. You're seeing how many colonies form. So each colony was one organism, and then they're counting those after they dilute it down, so you can actually count them. And so we find that there are products out there now that have, well over 1 billion, tens of billions, some have hundreds of billions of organisms. Certainly, as you're saying, the types of organisms matter.
Mhm.
Um, but it's really hard to get a handle on that whole field as to really which organisms are really best or not. There are a lot of kind of patented organisms out there, so you'll see a lot of research on those. It doesn't necessarily mean that the ones that aren't patented aren't just as good. Um, I think there's, the real, I mean, to cut through all of it, I think nutrition is more important than taking a
Thank
probiotic, and
you.
making sure that as that you have that healthy, gut biome, and it's what you're eating. And you also now have prebiotics and postbiotics, in
Hmm.
addition to the probiotics in the
Hmm.
middle. The
Yeah.
prebiotics, are the things that help, are the foods that help,
Fiber.
that right, the fermentable fibers, fermentable because these organisms can eat them.
Hmm.
Um, which also can cause issues for people because it causes, gas and bloating and things like that. Um, so there are supplements that sell those. I'm skeptical of a lot of those. We do test them, because you're not getting a lot. If you're eating a meal with a lot of fermentable fiber, that's one thing. But if you're taking a capsule with it, you're not getting a lot to start with. So you really need to take a lot as a powder. And again, you can get it from a food. And then there's the postbiotics. So basically, once the bacteria, kind of digest the food, they're making these butyrates and other probably helpful compounds. So now people are trying to go directly to the end products, the butyrates.
Yeah.
Um, so that, it's another aspect. But I think really, frankly, if you're eating the right food, and your gut's healthy, that's much better than taking, a pre, post, or probiotic, in
Wow.
my opinion.
Uh-huh.
But we do test the products and we do show which ones, have what they claim, which ones don't. Um, the quality has gotten better with probiotics, as I said earlier. Companies weren't even aware of like the shipping and storage issues that were happening, and lots of products were dying. Lots of organisms. I think I can tell you the two that have the most evidence behind them, and we have tested these are like Visbiome, I believe it's called, is one of them, and the other one is Culturelle, which is probably one of the oldest ones out there. Um, so in terms of like clinical evidence, probably those two, the quality tends to be good. Historically, it wasn't always great, but lately we're seeing better results.
How do you spell the first one? Dysbiome with D?
With a V,
This.
Visbiome,
Mhm.
Visbiome,
Got it.
right? And we have no relationship with any of these companies. We don't make money selling
Yeah.
supplements, as they said.
Before we switch from supplements to food, last question on the latest trends of supplements for longevity, NAD, NMN, and Urolithin A. How do you feel, and if you've tested those, because those are really cutting edge. There's like, I don't know if there's enough science to be able to test, especially like Urolithin A. How what do you think about those?
Yeah. We haven't tested Urolithin A. We've tested all the NAD boosters, NMN, was it nicotinamide riboside, NR, and I forget the third one. I mean, from an evidence perspective, I'm
Mhm.
not convinced, because yes, they may help boost NAD, but it's not really clear that's doing anything for you. I mean, a lot of these supplements, it's a lot of borrowed science, in my opinion, where, we know that these are important compounds in your body. They do important things, but taking them as a supplement doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be doing those things any better. So I'm not convinced by the evidence with those, but we have reviewed them. There have been a lot of problems found with some of these supplements that are sold, particularly on Amazon. Products that really don't have what they claim at all. So if you're going to be buying those supplements, I would definitely look at our reports and see which ones at least provide what they're claiming.
Wow, only $63 a year. Very democratic prices. And you know how I, got an idea to interview you? It's the Live Long conference. They interviewed me when they were placing me as a speaker, and their media company, they really wanted to, chase to the root cause of like, where do you get your latest science information? And I mentioned you, not you specifically, but consumer labs. And it's like I worked at clinics in New York, in Miami, in Switzerland. And I'm like, I'm the person who's supposed to know it all. Like clients asking me, what do I think about all these brands? And I'm like, look, I have to, and thanks to your work, and they interviewed you and they invited you, and that's how we all got connected, like this
Thank you.
pioneers and warriors of providing trustworthy information about these longevity trends. All right, next question is about food testing. This one is I've heard a lot of different scaring like scary statements about how our food is so dirty. We need to embrace this clean food trend, which means nothing to me. I mean, it's all about the soil quality, I feel like, and that's what we need to take care of. But from the testing perspective, you've tested so many products in your lab. Talk to me about the food quality and how that plays into, because so far you kept saying like nutrition is where it's at. Forget the
Mhm.
supplements, but when it comes to the nutrient-dense foods, talk to me about your top recommendation and how that turns out in your lab.
Yeah, yeah. So we've tested everything from bone broth, to psyllium, husk supplements, and as I said, dark chocolate, canned fish products. We do find a lot of contamination in these products. The issue with these isn't so much, does it have the amount of magnesium or whatever, that it claims or whatever. It's is it contaminated? Or does it have any bacterial contamination as well? Um, and it's surprising, first of all, that companies don't even test these products for heavy metals in many cases. We looked at flaxseed, we've looked at sesame seed seeds, sesame seed butters, and we're finding a lot of heavy metals in products, and it really varies depending on where these products are being sourced from.
Hmm.
Um, so we're finding lots of cadmium in some of these products, which is a kidney toxin. It's also interferes with with bone because it competes with calcium. Certainly cadmium and lead in dark chocolate. Um, and levels really can be quite high in some of these products. Um, so and then companies, it's what happens is our members will contact these companies because we're not interacting with the companies, on this stuff. We're not going to the FDA and say, look into this. We're just putting the information out there. But our members are going to the companies saying, like, what's going on? I've been buying this product for years, and now ConsumerLab says it has, cadmium, and then they write back, no, 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 like, we do testing, and then when you dig into it, they're doing very minimal testing. Their standards are very low for like how much they would allow. Usually, like, so I think we're pushing now the industry to have to do a little bit better because the FDA is not asking them to do this type of testing.
Yeah.
I think they're just being expected more by the consumer. Um, so yeah, so there are definitely issues that we're finding with all these different health foods. Um, sometimes more problems with those than even with the supplements. I think the supplement industry has learned its lesson and is at least bigger players, are learning how to do that better. Although I can't say I recommend any particular brand like always passes our tests. Some do better with certain categories of products than others. Um, and then I would just say more generally that a higher price does not correlate with better quality in most of our tests that we do. We're just putting out a report on Manuka honey.
Yeah.
Just editing that today. That's one of the few where actually we saw price did correlate more with quality. But one of the most popular products out there turns out is like a lousy product, but it's also a cheaper product. But with supplements, there are a lot of premium brands out there. They charge you extra. You're not really getting the value for that. And there are certainly situations where you can get a very good basic supplement, from Costco, the Kirkland, um, that's really good value. And frankly, when I do take a supplement, I'm usually going for these value brands where I know they're giving you all that's supposed to be there, and you're getting it for like 5 cents.
Okay. Well, we're about to wrap up, and I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions.
But,
Um,
before you do that, I do want to point out that even there is this impression that the supplement industry is unregulated, and that and in general, relative to this drug area, the regulations are much more lax. But there are regulations, just so people are aware, just that they're they're very lax, and the companies, it's really left to the company to do the right thing. They just have to make sure that they're providing 100% of what they claim, but even then, they don't always do that. And the FDA is not checking up on them. They do very, very limited audits. So I just wanted to comment on that. But now let's go to
Okay, so it is
question.
regulated, but it's very like industry friendly, you mean, right? Like for them to just do the right thing and no one's really checking on their what's the analysis that they have to provide like a third like
Certificate of analysis.
yeah.
Yeah, they're not the FDA is not checking. They don't have to get these things licensed, approved before they're on the market or after they're on the market. So the FDA is really pretty hands off, with all of that.
You did mention one thing. You said that when it comes to like sesame, flax, or psyllium, or whatever the product that you're testing, the heavy metals or contaminants really depends on where they're sourcing it from. Have you seen any trends of where does the product come from? Where's the safest levels come from?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I think it was with sesame or flax, was it? Um, and I think it was if products from North Dakota were the worst. Products from Europe were better. And I apologize. I think it was sesame. It might have been flax. I off the top of my head, I don't remember. But
No
you
problem.
see this, and then when you look into it, we're like, there are all kinds of academic papers all about this all out there. This was not like an unknown. It's a known issue.
Yeah,
But yet, these companies are still not testing for these things.
got it. All right. Based on your research and the amount of work and literature that you've done on human health, do you recommend plant-based or animal-based diet to your consumers?
Again, I'm not recommending one way or the other. I'm not acting as a healthcare, a professional to these people. I'm providing just the facts of what we know, what we find. But I can tell you personally,
Yeah.
I lean toward vegetable, toward plant-based foods, but I don't exclude, you know, some chicken here. Certainly eat fish. Stay away from things that are more contaminated. Um, Rarely I'll have some red meat. Um, and that, but that just goes with what I know.
What's your favorite plant-based protein source?
Last night we had a nice uh, tofu like teriyaki dish. Kind of a firm, chunks of tofu. So I don't know. I'd probably say tofu and soy base edamame.
Okay. Where do you like your soy to be sourced from, if you care at all? Is it like American grown? Is it Japanese grown? I mean,
No,
if you,
it's a good question.
yeah.
Having this conversation, we've not tested any tofu or soy products. Maybe that's something we should be doing.
Totally. Because look, I come from nutrition science and I always like when I'm in Europe or in Asia, when I go to like Bali, I was just in Dubai, I always order my coffee with soy milk because I know the nutritional density of it. It's like a copy
Uh,
paste of cow's milk because of the protein, fats, and carbohydrates. And there's no other plant-based milk that has the amount of protein. But here in the United States, I always say like make sure you find it that says like non-GMO, that it's like organically grown, because I tend to, I don't do testing, but I tend to create relationship with the founders, with people who truly. So I know a few farmers that grow soy products, and they're very careful. They're very proud. This is non-GMO grains. This is all organically grown. I'm like, yep, that's the type of soy I'll eat. But that's the quality. It's like I don't test, but I trust the philosophy and the mission of the smaller businesses in my profession. That's that's what tends to work.
yeah, yeah. Although sometimes I think some of these companies they put that forward a kind of a friendly face. I mean, I'm not talking about when you actually go there and visit the farm, but and you can be misled by what looks like to be a kind of nice friendly face. Like we've tested a lot of like Bob's Red Mill products
Uh-huh.
lately.
Uh-huh.
And I always thought he had a, I think he passed away, but he's a friendly face,
Yeah.
Bob's Red Mill. Um, Not impressed with the quality, in general with those products. So yeah, these you got to be careful.
Got it. All right, last few questions. The longevity trend, and when it comes to supplement and food, that's worth following from your perspective in the future, like looking into the future.
Um, yeah, I do really think and hope that people do continue to listen to the advice of people like you and think of like food first. The people who get into trouble with supplements are the people who just go gung ho into something. They think, oh, XYZ is good for me. Just gonna have that all the time. I mean, moderation. That's the trend that I think everyone should consider. With everything, especially with foods and supplements, because if something is contaminated, or has some kind of effect, the poison's in the dose. So whatever it is, moderation and really consider food first.
I love how refreshingly conservative you are. It's it's a very good voice to hear in the industry. And on that note, I'm going to ask you, who is your favorite educator in the industry that you think more people should be listening to and that I should interview next?
Um, I did enjoy meeting, what is his name? It was actually at the same conference that we were both at.
Good long?
Michael,
Gregor?
yeah.
I'm
Have you
interviewing him
interviewed him?
next.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he does a great job explaining things.
Yeah.
And he's kind of fun to listen to.
Yes, he's
So
very
I think,
full of energy and
yeah,
entertaining.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we just spoke yesterday and following up
Oh, great.
later this month, I'll interview him. Yes. He wrote a
Oh,
book,
good.
How Not to Die. Have you read it?
I haven't read it. I've heard
Yeah,
him talk
you've heard
about
it.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, amazing. All right. And the last question. What do you think each consumer, what do you wish each consumer would know that after testing, you have access to incredible wealth of information that most people don't, and you're sharing it so generously for like well, close to nothing. What is it? Less than $8 per month, right? What's your wish for that? You're leaving this legacy of building this such an incredible wealth of data and but after testing all of this, what do you wish more consumers would know of?
Well, number one is just is it's a buyer beware situation, both in terms of even choosing that to use a supplement, let alone buying and using a supplement. So you really, you just because your neighbor told you, that he's using XYZ, don't go buy it, and use it. You've really got to do your research. There are a lot of red flags you can look at when you buy a supplement, like I'm not a fan of proprietary formulas and blends that don't tell you the exact amounts that are in there. That's a real red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Other red flags to look out for is products that claim to be, FDA approved or made in an FDA approved lab. The FDA doesn't approve these products. Um, Certification seals, we talked about third party. Companies are just slapping on their own things saying third party certified. But with no indication of who that third party was, another red flag. Um, so those are just some of the things to look out for, when you're buying a product. And certainly, obviously we recommend our information on consumerlab.com, to kind of go soup to nuts through should you use it, what to buy, what not to buy, and side effects and interactions, that can occur.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for doing this interview and for the hard work that you're doing in education and high quality information providing to our industry and to our consumers. And yeah, it was a pleasure interviewing you.
Yeah, Ella, thank you very much. And thanks for what you're doing to, educate people. I appreciate it.
Awesome. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Cooperman.
Okay, thanks.
Bye bye.